Hello again, and welcome to the second of my end of year book videos. We'll see how many of these actually get released into the wild, but this one is the very standard tier ranking of all the books that I've read this year. So hopefully I've got all of the books here. They're in a jumbled order, so it's not actually very easy for me to do a spot check and see if everything's here. But this does include the rereads as well, unlike when I did the battling. It says there's 86 files. I think there should be 86 or 87, but let's say it's 86, and we'll go from here. Now, my categories I've got here, they're very straightforward. First of all, I've got a category for favourites of the year. That's anything that, like, I now think of it as a favourite book. Below that, I've got I really loved this, so maybe it was excellent, but it's just not quite in that favourite category. The third category is an interesting one because it's where I can see that it's an excellent book, but I just personally maybe didn't resonate with it or didn't, regard it as a favourite or something that I could really feel some love for. I still want to show appreciation for its greatness, shall we say. The fourth one is like, fine, but we all hate Sandra Bedford. And if you've read The Dreamweavers, you know what I'm talking about there. So there's a little reference in that one. And then the last one is just, a little bit of a, maybe don't read this book, or maybe I really didn't like this book. We'll see what ends up in that category. So it's overall more positive than negative. And I would like to say that I have had a positive reading year and read some really good books. And in general, I think most books that I try to read are ones that people say are good. So it should be pretty positive. So we'll go from the order that it's come up in here, and let's see where things end up. So first of all, we've got, that helps to move the right thing. We've got Peril at End House by Agatha Christie, and I'm going to put that in. I really loved this. I've mentioned that it was the first Agatha Christie book that I read this year when we've been reading all the Poirots, where I actually really enjoyed it, like more than usual. And I think that part of that is because I was reading the physical book and had more control over the story, therefore, and was sort of telling it to myself. And I think that just worked better for me, but also because I thought the story was really good. I think we had a very good main character, a very good twist. The character depth was deeper than in other previous Poirot books, which I think makes a huge difference to how things play out and how satisfied you feel with any twists and things like that. So I was very happy with it. Next one we've got is I think it was the last book I finished reading in 2023, and it's Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which was a reread, but this just cemented that it's one of my favourite books of all time. It's, I just feel so attached to the Logan family as I'm reading it. Like, when I put it down, I almost forget like how attached I become. But this reread, I was like making a mental note, like, oh yeah, this is really good. I wasn't just making it up, like, this is really good. So I recommend that everyone reads Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. It should have the same level of fame as something like To Kill a Mockingbird, because it's not the same story, but there's a similar-ish setup and things that go on, and it's in the American Deep South at the same sort of time, and it's told from a young girl's point of view, but in this case, the young girl is actually a black young girl, whereas Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird is white, and I think it's good to, have a black young girl's perspective of these times as well, especially when the main topic of discussion is race. Next, we've got Gabriel Garcia Marquez's Of Love and Other Demons. This was a very weird book. I mean, it's sort of like an excellent book, but it deals with what I'd describe as problematic things. And I'm not going to say that, that's showing that Marquez is sympathetic to these problematic things. No, I don't believe that at all. Like, he's discussing these things in this book. but is still a bit uncomfortable and not necessarily portrayed in a way that makes it known that you're meant to find it uncomfortable. I'm going to put it in fine. There's no Sandra Bedford, but there is a weird priest, shall we say. I need to move this out of the way, really. Right, Hannah's Suitcase. Non-fiction, really, really good, crucial story. Everyone should read it. It's very short, very quick, and accessible to children as well. So please read it. Next one, Agatha Christie, Murder on the Links. I actually had a lot of fun with this. No, it's not as good as some of her later Poirots, and I know that some people think that it's not a great one, but I actually quite enjoyed it. I was very happy to read it. David Copperfield, a new favourite for sure. Okay. I really enjoyed listening to this on audio, had a great time. The characters are iconic. Like, how many iconic characters can you fit into one book? And Dickens literally said, hold my beer, I've got this. You know, like, I'm definitely going to have to dive into more Dickens, because this is only the second Dickens novel I've ever read, but I really loved it, and it's one of the biggest ones. So, you know, where can I go from here? Next is Venus in Copper by Lindsay Davis. This, I really loved it. I don't think it's going to go in my favourite of the year, but let's put it right at the top of I really loved it, because I just love those books so much. Like, I guess the Marcus de Falco books would probably be a favourite series of all time, but as individual books, I don't think any of them individually are like my favourite book of the year, but they're all really good, and they're really, you know, really close to the top. Graceling was a reread because it was my favourite from last year or the year before, so that goes up here as well. I think I'll put rereads just at the bottom of the pile to allow the other things to shine a little bit, but I do love Graceling. It's a YA fantasy, it's great fun, it's sort of an adventure story. You know, in this land people have graces, which are like their magical power. Not everyone is graced, though. It's still quite rare. And we're following a main character whose grace is killing. Like, killing comes really easily to her. And then it's what she decides to do with this power that is the most interesting thing. So it may seem like a little bit of a YA trope that, oh, the main character is just so good at killing, blah, blah, blah. But the difference between this and other YA books is how that is then developed, right? That's not the be-all, end-all. The next thing is The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin. This was really good, but I'm not sure I'd describe myself as loving it. I think it can go an excellent book, but just not quite clicking enough. Like, I still think it's really good. I still recommend it, and it's a really important read in terms of sci-fi, but it's not one that I'm like, oh yeah, new favourite. City of Ships, I really love this. The nostalgia is strong with the Stravaganza series. It's not the best book ever written for sure. Like, in the middle section of the book, I was like, I don't think they've remembered to edit this. They just rolled it out because they know that Stravaganza is at least moderately successful. So there is not a perfect book at all. Like, genuinely, all of the books in the third category will probably be better written books than City of Ships. But you know what? It had a fun plot. It had, you know, our heroine learning how to save the day herself, and all the characters that I love so much, like Sky and Luciano and Georgia and everyone. Like, love that. The Magicians. I didn't love it, and I wouldn't necessarily describe it as an excellent book either. So I think I'm just going to put it in fine. I don't know if it's better than Love and Other Demons. I rank them quite similarly, to be honest. I think just leave it there. Adult fantasy, learning magic at university. It is what it is. Strange book with the characters are usually what people hate because they find them really pretentious and stuff. But if you know that's what's being gone for, like, I don't see a problem with it. The Time Traveller's Wife. I think this is a new favourite. I mean, Jenny really did me a solid with that one, like telling me to read it for ages and ages, and then I finally read it, and yeah, it was really good. I don't even understand why it was so good. It just worked. You know, there was there crack in the pages, as they say, but I don't know. It just was good. I really liked it. Similarly, I think I'll put this the other side, right? Similarly, Water for Elephants. Why did this work so well for me? I don't know. It was like crack. In fact, I liked it more than The Time Traveler's Wife because, well, partly because it was shorter and a bit more compact, but it was just like boom, 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 crazy event, crazy event. I don't know. It read in a similar way to like how a John Green book almost would read. Like it was a page, you got through the pages quite quickly. There was stuff going on. I can see why it became really popular. The Kite Runner, another book that I can see why it became so popular. Is this a favourite though? I'm not sure. It did click though. So maybe I'll just put it at the top of I really loved this. I don't think it's a new favourite. It's a bit too much like, you know, sadness porn kind of thing. I thought it was really well done for what it was. I've emphasised that it's a really simple premise, just done really well and thoroughly. But yeah, there's a bit too much like sad stuff just for the sake of toying with your emotions for me to call it a favourite. Another sort of nostalgia favours me reading the next book in the Pillars of the Earth series. This is World Without End. Pillars of the Earth is one of my favourite books of all time. I really loved World Without End. It was just really nice to be back in Ken Follett's historical writing. Would this go at the top of I really loved this or near the bottom of favourite of the year? Sort of a toss-up. I'm going to put it at the bottom favourite of the year for now, and we'll see if I want to change that later. The Black Prism is a really big book. It's fantasy. It's modern fantasy with a colour-based magic system, so people can create coloured like material themselves, which is called Luxin, and then they can build stuff with it, and the different colours have different properties. Some people have control of just one colour, some people have control of two colours. The most powerful person in the world has control of all the colours, and they are called the Prism. So this is a fantasy story about the Prism and some people around him, and then wars and stuff that's going on. You know, it's quite a page turner, actually. I would say I really loved this. I'll put it, I don't know, probably around the same place as Peril at End House. I don't know. The Islands of Chaldea is a kid's story. It's the last book from Diana Wynne Jones, published posthumously, with the finishing touches added by her sister. It's, you know, a basic, decent kids' fantasy story. It's got a bit of character development, a bit of interesting plotting, a bit of discovering yourself along the way sort of thing. Like, I think it was just fine, but I'll put it at the top of fine because, like, there wasn't anything wrong with it. It just wasn't particularly stand out, right? A Man Called Ove, I didn't really like, to be honest. Like, maybe it is excellent, but just didn't click with me. But actually, as I've said before, the thing about this was the sad stuff was all too realistic, and the happy stuff felt unrealistic, and I didn't like that. And so it didn't click for me, but I'm gonna put it in because I'm not convinced that it was excellent. I still gave it like a decent rating because I can see some positive stuff about it, but ultimately looking back on it, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Anyway, the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. This is a fantasy where the fantasy magic system is based on being able to manipulate the earth, basically. So you've got geological powers, essentially. And this, I was hoping this would be a favourite. Maybe my expectations are a bit too high because I did really love it. I thought it was really good. There was some stuff in it that was fantastic, but it just didn't click in the way that a favourite clicks. So I think I'm going to put it probably just above The Black Prism, because it was really good. Maybe on a reread I might like it more. I'm not sure. One that did feel like a favourite at the time was The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu. Sci-fi that's to do with the introduction of meeting aliens and having first contact. I would say this is the favourite of the year. It's more intellectual than any of the ones that I've got here, but where would I rank it? That is the question. I'll put it there for now. I don't know if that's right. I'm not sure. We'll see. All the Light We Cannot See. This is sort of like, I loved it, or / I enjoyed it, but it wasn't a favourite, but it was an excellent book. I think I'm going to put it in excellent book, no problems, just didn't click, because it didn't quite click with me. Like, there was good stuff, but ultimately, no matter how sympathetic it is, I'm not a massive fan of following a Nazi point of view. I did appreciate seeing like how non-Nazi types ended up serving the Nazis and that sort of stuff, but I don't know. It was perhaps one that I was let down by a little bit because I'd heard so many good things about it beforehand. Brooklyn, I've already said the film is better than the book. It polishes up the plot of the book very nicely. If you are interested in this story, I would recommend the film above the book. It was not a favourite read. Didn't like some of the things that were done in this book. And also a chunk of it was quite boring, and considering it's a short book, like it was, there was no need for it to be like that. Mystery of the Blue Train was fine. It was fine. I don't know, not a favourite Agatha Christie. The Wonder was also fine. I think a lot of people would put it in this bottom section, but I was fine with it. I did not hate it because I read it all in one go, or 2 goes pretty much. The Winter King, I really loved this. I don't know if it's a favourite of the year. I'm guessing it might end up being a favourite trilogy, but the actual book itself may not be a favourite of the year. It can go right at the top of I really love this. I've heard the second book in the trilogy is the best one, so I have really high hopes, which I should probably restrain a little bit, for reading the second one in 2024. And of course, one of my favourite characters of the year is Galahad from The Winter King. It's an Arthur retelling, so it's meant to be like a realistic Arthur retelling, like what it might actually have been. So Arthur was not actually the king. Arthur may have been a warlord, and so Bernard Cornwell is exploring like how this could have worked and how the legends could actually have sprung from these historical situations that he's creating. And just the immersion, the level of detail is really excellent. Like Bernard Cornwell, having read a couple of his books this year, is, probably a new favourite author for me because I just really like how he does that historical fiction. Poirot Investigates, I'm going to put in or maybe put in fine. I wasn't that impressed by these short stories, but I don't know if it was just like I was a bit miserable at the time of reading them, so it sort of spoilt my enjoyment. Maybe there. Something like that. Emma didn't click with me as much as I was hoping it would. It was the last Jane Austen book I hadn't read yet, so now I've completed them. And I can say that it's not my least favourite. That's still Northanger Abbey, but it's certainly not my favourite. It's not up to the standards of Pride and Prejudice, nor the personal standard of Persuasion. It would either be at the bottom of Love This or excellent book, no problems, just didn't click. It did sort of click though, so I think I will, in fact, put it here. Okay. Into the Water by Paula Hawkins, a mystery, not really a thriller. It's like solving the mystery and seeing if there are going to be any more deaths. It's not really a thriller. It's more a chiller, I would say. It's chilling. It's very sad. I wouldn't say I loved it. I had no problems with it. So I think I'll just put it in excellent book. No problems, just didn't click. The Ember Blade. This was an epic fantasy, very much in the same vein as Lord of the Rings. You get your cast of characters who get built up bit by bit, and then they have to go on an adventure together. And then the best bit was really the climax at the end was really excellent. Now, the only thing I'd say is it took me ages to read this book, and it is a sort of book that I'd want to reread to freshen up on all the details before I read the sequel, but it would take me so long. I just don't know what I'd do about that. So I did love it. I definitely loved it more than Murder on the Links. Did I say it was better than City of Ships? I have a feeling I had these two battling against each other. Maybe I'll put it there. Like, I did really like it, but it's just, it took so long. The Betrayal by Kate Furnivall was enjoyable, like good trash, if that makes sense. Good historical. It's not trash, like it's just fun stuff. A bit like City of Ships, I suppose. So I did enjoy it. Historical drama set in 1938 in Paris. You know, it starts with a bit of a like someone killed someone in the same way that I would say books like Colleen Hoover books start with something like really dramatic to try and hook you when the book is maybe a little bit about some other things, but they just have that much drama, you know. Our next one is a favourite of the year, The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell. I really thought this was going to be my number one book. It's not, but it's pretty close. I recommend the audiobook. It was really good. I recommend rereading it. Butterfly by Yusra Mardini. Straight to top of the year. Favourite memoir autobiography of the year. Explaining the situation from being middle-class Syrian to becoming a refugee to becoming an Olympic athlete. Fantastic. Wilbur Smith's Seventh Scroll, also a favourite of the year. This was so much fun, an adventure story I really liked. Actually, I'm going to switch these. Ooh, this gets difficult. This top row, they're all so good. A Seventh Scroll, like it is a bit long, but it's like, you know, your Indiana Jones adventure stuff with a posh Englishman who's financing this mission to make sure you get it before the bad guys. Oh, it's just fun. Reaper at the Gates, excellent book, but this series is still not quite clicking for me. I wish it would, because the ideas, the concepts and so on are excellent. But it's just not been a favourite for me. It's really hard to sort of describe why. Maybe I've outgrown it, except that it doesn't read like YA, to be honest. It's quite adult, especially some of the chapters. Like most of the characters are adults by now. Maybe the youngest is about 17, but you know, still is very dark for YA. Anyway, I don't know. It's not quite clicking. I think there's just too much bad stuff happens. Like the ratio of good stuff to bad stuff isn't enough to give me serotonin with that book series yet. So Michelle Obama, Becoming. I did love this. Where did I love this? I loved this about that much. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. I mean, it's just something that everyone should read. It's really interesting to hear about her background. And just hear about her stories from growing up and things like that. Two Dark Reigns. This is the One Dark Crown book 3. The series as a whole has been fine, maximum fine. at the bottom of fine. Like, I'm glad I finished the series off, and unfortunately, I feel like the concepts and the ideas behind that series were really good. The execution was bad. The writing is good, but the execution of the plot points and how things all fit together is bad and generally unsatisfying. So I'll put this. Maybe I'll put the final one in. I think probably the final one is regarded as being the worst. But I didn't regard it that strongly as being the worst because I'd been disappointed with the rest of the series anyway. The Silence of the Girls, one of my favourite books of the year. I am going to put it right at the top. Iliad retelling from the point of view of Briseis. It was just really good. I remember being in Cambridge and reading it, and it was just so engrossing and well written, and I was just impressed the whole time. And it just transported me, and that's what you want the books to do. The House Guest was a relatively bog standard but well carried out thriller. I wouldn't say I loved this, but it was certainly an excellent book. I'll put it there, I think. Trials of Apollo book 4. I reread this so I can go on to book 5. I preferred it on the reread. I think I will put it here. I don't like the Trials of Apollo as much as I like the Percy Jackson series, partly because I don't like Apollo as much as a main character, and also because the supporting cast gets rotated through each book quite a lot, so you have different sidekicks each book. And there's pros and cons to this, but I'm just not as attached to them as Percy, Annabeth and Grover, so there you go. I'm still looking forward to reading the rest, though. Heartstopper is, of course, a favourite, but not enough to be like right at the very top. Yeah, I still think the TV show is better, but I never said that. Mysterious Affair at Styles, I really enjoy. I think it's a great Agatha Christie. I think I will put it. Yeah, maybe there. Yeah, it's the first Poirot. And it sets the scene so well for the characters of Hastings and Poirot, and they're so fully formed from the get-go. It's quite amazing, especially considering how little Agatha Christie did for other character formations until something like Peril at End House. Family Upstairs was a reread that I really enjoyed this year. I hadn't enjoyed it as much before, but actually, yeah, I had fun with that. The Kingdom of Back, a retelling about Mozart and his sister's childhood, so Nannerl and Wolfgang Amadeus, but with a little bit of magical realism thrown in, so a bit of magic that's going on. I wish I'd loved this, but the fact is I didn't. It got quite close. I might end up putting it at the bottom of Love This because there were elements that I loved, but I wanted it to be a favourite, and I think that's what the disappointment was. So I'll put it at the bottom of I Love This because, yeah, I did love bits of it, but it just didn't quite hit where I wanted it to hit. The Unexpected Return of Josephine Fox. This is a wartime murder mystery story. Quite liked the mystery of this. Quite liked the ideas behind the characters. Didn't like the flashback scenes. Also, there was a weird thing where, like, the stuff that was flashback was written in present tense, but the stuff in the present was written in past tense, and I found that so annoying. And I just basically didn't love the execution of this, and there were some boring bits, and could have been better than it was, I think. So it's going to go here. Or maybe, I don't know. We'll see. When No One Is Watching is a thriller about gentrification and race. It was pretty good. It was enjoyable. I did kind of love it. I think it's going to go... I think it's going to go here. I think the categories are correct and the order is maybe a little bit iffy. Raybearer was a reread in order for me to move on to the final book in this series. It was one of my favourites of last year or the year before. It was fantastic. I'm just going to put it in with these other rereads that were fantastic. Written in the Stars was fine. It was a good LGBT romance, but nothing really to write home about. Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. Very odd little book. Some weird things happen in this book. 100% would reread though. I don't know if it didn't click or if it was just a bit too weird for me to really love. But I think I'll put it... I think I liked it more than All the Light We Cannot See, actually, so I'll put it there. Invisible Girl, a thriller by Lisa Jewell. I did enjoy this. How much so? Probably going to go with these other thrillers. I think I enjoyed it more than those other two, but they're all about the same, like, you know, a thriller that's a thriller that just does its job, does what it says on the tin without being like super crazy with a really original plot. Like no one is watching being a thriller about gentrification rather than about a murder that's been committed, you know? Like these three, there's someone who's died or disappeared. They've got to work out if it was murder, if it was suicide, who done it, etc. Like that's what it is, you know? All well done, I think, but nothing, you know, they're middle of the road thrillers for me. The Mercies, this is the pinnacle of excellent book, no problems, just didn't click, to be honest, because I think it really was an excellent book, but I didn't love it, even though there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. It absolutely was well written. It did what it was meant to do. It had a good plot. It had LGBT representation in a historical novel. You know, it had realism in historical terms. I thought it was very good, but I just didn't love it. The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi, I did love. Controversially, I like this by S.A. Chakraborty probably more than City of Brass, which is her more popular series. I do think this should have been a standalone though, so I did enjoy it. I'm gonna put it here. Open Water, another one that's an excellent book, no problems, just didn't click. I think it will go there. Very beautifully written, very short, things that are very thought-provoking if you want to be thinking about, you know, maybe the day-to-day thoughts of people who aren't from your perspective and thinking, oh gosh, yeah, I guess I never thought that they'd have to think like that. It's eye-opening from that perspective, but it's not the type of escapism that I personally look for in the books that I read. These Hollow Vows, however, was meant to be escapism, but wasn't because it was so boring. Yeah, maybe it's in there we go. Should be a romantasy, but I expect more romance in a romantasy. We barely even have pining looks. We have these character interactions that they made clear from the start they like each other. There's a love triangle that doesn't even feel like a love triangle. It's just a bit, ugh. It didn't deliver for me, unfortunately. 1,000 Ships is a... Did I really love this? Maybe I'll put this at the bottom of I really love this. It's a bit like Kingdom of Back, where it was good. It didn't quite hit to be a favourite. I definitely preferred it to Stone Blind. I'm also glad I read it as a book because I think the tone of some of Natalie Haynes' perspectives can come across a bit grating to me. So reading it in my head sort of cancels that out a little bit. The Iron Hand of Mars, I love. It's got my new book Boyfriend. I don't think it's as good a plot as Venus in Copper, but I learned a lot about the Teutoburg massacre and things like that, very exciting, obviously. I am joking. I'm gonna put this here. Okay, Mysterious Affair of Styles is gonna go here. There we go. Shards of Earth by Adrian Tchaikovsky is a very good hard sci-fi book. It's a big one. It's full of space opera stuff, good characters, amazing concepts. I really loved this. It's not a favourite though, but I did really love it. I'm trying to think how much I loved it. Probably this much. I do wonder how much this is aligning with what I did in the book battles. Have I changed my mind on everything, or am I doing the exact same decision making? Bitter Blue. I really love Bitter Blue. But it's not a favourite in the way that Graceling and Fire was. If I put it in favourites, I would be being a little bit naughty, I think. Giving it preferential treatment. Amari and the Night Brothers, however, is a favourite. Right to the almost top there. That deserves the hype. Like, I knew about the hype and I still wasn't disappointed by it when I read it. That's how good it was. Women of Troy is the sequel to Silence of the Girls, but it doesn't deserve to be next to it. I did, however, really love it. I probably loved it about that much. There we go. Hitler's Canary is a new favourite, but it's not going to be right at the top. Where's it going to go? Yeah, probably here. No, here. The Other Bennet Sister, I did really love this. I thought it was a bit long for what it was, though. But I did like hearing about Mary Bennet's story. There was a bit of character assassination, I thought, for Mr. Darcy's character development, according to Pride and Prejudice. He sort of, like in this book, he sort of reverts back to being a bit of an antisocial asshole. And yeah, that was a bit annoying, but the actual main plot line of what Mary goes through was really good. So, do I like it more than Emma? That's a thought. Ooh, that is a thought. I think I do, you know. That's interesting. But maybe I should listen to Emma on audio and then I'd have a different opinion. Okay, we're nearly there. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. This is a classic. I love it. It's really good. Agatha Christie. However, I think I preferred Peril at End House this year, so that was interesting to discover. Gilded, I really loved. It's such a shame about the sequel, which I'll talk about in a minute. I thought this was going to be a great new YA fantasy for me, and it just wasn't. It didn't live up the whole way through. It didn't live up to it. The Dreamweavers was fine, but we all hate Sandra Bedford. I actually really loved the Anglo-Saxon storyline. It's a shame about Sandra Bedford. I'd almost rank this higher, but like the Sandra Bedford plotline was one of my least favourite plotlines in any book that I've read, the more I think about it, even though I really loved the Anglo-Saxon plotline. Like, it's almost like it should be in I really loved this, but we all hate Sandra Bedford. Redemptor is a sequel to Raybearer, but it wasn't as good as Raybearer. But was it still a favourite of the year? I gave it 5 stars. But I don't think it was as good as these. Pop it here. Yeah, that works. So it's like nearly a favourite, but it's not quite a favourite. All the Young Dudes. Technically a fanfic, but as soon as it becomes the size of a book and people start publishing it, it's basically a book. So this is book 1 of 3, and this is right up there, like Marauders fanfic. Not saying original author's name because I don't want to support her, but honestly, the author of this fanfic is better. I think this might go there. You know, we'll see how the rest of the books do. I'll read them this year. The Embroidered Book. I wanted to love this. it was actually similar to The Kingdom of Back, where it was like, I really love the concept. Something about the execution didn't quite click. I think it goes here though. I do quite enjoy when you've got a historical event that doesn't really make sense as to why the person did it. You're like, are they just a terrible person? And then you get some kind of historical fantasy fiction that explain why they made that choice because of some kind of fantasy element. And that happens in Marie Antoinette's story in the Embroidered Book, and I did actually really like that. Actually, I would say it isn't that there's no problems. There are problems with this book, so I'm going to put it up here instead. Like, because all the rest of these in this category, there aren't problems with them, and they just didn't quite click. Abby Jimenez, Part of Your World, my favourite romance of the year. It's going right up to the top. It was an easy 5-star out of 5. It did what it needed to do. It gave me the serotonin. I was very happy with it. Amari and the Night Brothers, a sequel, which is Amari and the Great Game, actually. So Amari and the Night Brothers was right up there. Amari and the Great Game didn't quite live up to it. A bit like Redemptor. They suffered from a similar kind of second book syndrome where the author has been told to get the second book out in 1 year or something like that, and it totally defeats how good the first book was, because Amari and Raybearer were excellent and the authors had spent years building them up to that standard, and then the second book was really excellent too, but just not on the same level, unfortunately. Still really good though. Once Upon a Broken Heart, YA fantasy, bottom of I really loved this. Like, it's not actually that good, but it was a fun time. Juniper and Thorn, I was wondering if this is one of my favourites of the year. Like, it's really good. And I really liked it. I don't think I liked it more than The Winter King. Did I like it more than Bitterblue? I think I'll put it there. Juniper and Thorn is a fantasy horror story. Really gross stuff happens in this, but it's all about surviving trauma and finding your people. It was good. Wrong Place, Wrong Time is a thriller with an interesting premise, which therefore raises it higher than these ones. I did really love this. Where is it going to go? Here we hear. Still Life by Sarah Winman, a bit like The Mercies, utterly perfect, even maybe had some of my favourite characters in this, but I'm not sure if I loved it. It's a bit of a weird one. Did I love it, or was it just excellent, but not my thing? Well, it was excellent, but not my thing, but does that make me love it? That is the question. It's just not very comparable to anything else. Probably the closest would be The Mercies. I liked it more than The Mercies, I think. It's an excellent book either way, and if you want something very sedate and well written, then you should try it. Alice Feeney's Daisy Darker. I really loved this. I'm going to put it right up here. Like, I did really love this, but probably not a favourite because it's not like amazing, but I did enjoy it. The Imagination Chamber, right at the bottom. I've said this before, there's no point publishing this book. There's only about 1 sentence of useful material in it. It's not a full book, it's a novella, but it is just, I'm so glad I didn't spend money on it, that's all. One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid was fine. I'm going to put it next to Written in the Stars as like a good romance. There's a good premise, so maybe I'll put it 1 above. A good premise, but I didn't have anything particularly great to say about it. It was just an easy sort of palate cleansing kind of book with just a bit more interesting of a premise than most romance books. Cursed is the sequel to Gilded, but I can tell you they are not on the same level. And maybe it was because Marissa Meyer was rushing for a deadline, a bit like with the sequel of Amari and Raybearer. But honestly, she then had so many pages of absolute nonsense that just didn't need to be in here. So I think this is my second least favourite book of the year. I don't know. This category is looking pretty rubbish to me, so I'm not sure where amongst this it sits, but roughly. Demon Copperhead, retelling of David Copperfield. I think I do like it more than David Copperfield. It won against most of these things in the battle. So I think it goes here, but a lot of credit is due to David Copperfield because it does take a lot of the story structure and plot beats from David Copperfield. So it's almost like David Copperfield should be bang next to it, really, but it just tidies it up a bit, and the execution is just so good. So it is one of my favourite books of the year. Peter Swanson, The Kind Worth Saving, sequel to iconic thriller mystery The Kind Worth Killing. I really loved this. I wouldn't say it's a new favourite, but it can go. Where can it go? Oh, yeah, I think I like Wrong Place, Wrong Time more. So these are two sort of more iconic thrillers next to each other, and the less iconic thrillers next to each other. Yeah, in fact, all of the thrillers on this row are sort of like a little bit special in their own way. Our Wives Under the Sea. This is a horror romance, which you wouldn't think mix, but it does. I really loved this. It's not a favourite, but it is worth reading. I'm gonna put it here, I think. I hope that adds up. The Big Four, not a strength for Agatha Christie. Put it at the beginning of probably her weakest Poirot so far. Local Girl Missing, I also didn't really love. I mean, there was probably nothing too much wrong with it. It did have a Sandra Bedford type character. Was the worst thriller I've read this year. It was better than that. Yeah, put it there. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, controversially not a favourite book of mine. Excellent book, just didn't click, probably is where it should go, because, yeah, I don't know why it didn't click, because I loved Normal People, and that is quite similar to how Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is, because it's just telling these two people's dysfunctional lives with each other, going in and out of their lives and doing things together and not doing things together. And it did remind me of Normal People, but Normal People was like, as Edward Cullen says, my personal brand of heroine. I didn't even want it to be, and it was. And Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow wasn't, even though I feel like it should have been, because there was a lot more that connected me to the characters, like the whole religion stuff, and, you know, being interested in maybe some nerdy things like video games. Not that I'm a gamer, but still. Accidental Gods was not an excellent book. It was fine. It was interesting. Like, it was more than fine. It was very interesting, but it just wasn't done well enough to go in any of the categories above this, really. Yeah. And then Last Night at the Telegraph Club. I did love this at the time. I don't think it deserves to be highly ranked in that category, though. Okay, so there we have it. 86 files ranked. It's kind of unsatisfying how we've got bunches left here. So I think I'm going to move 3 books up into the favourites category. There we go. So The Winter King, Daisy Darker, and Juniper and Thorn are all in the favourites category now. And I quite like that, actually. I think they do deserve that. They're all good in their own ways. in the bottom, of course, we have some annoyances here. So yeah, actually, these can go in then I'm more satisfied. We've got a nice clean ranking here now. So here we go. My favourite book of the year, The Silence of the Girls, followed very closely by Demon Copperhead, with my favourite non-fiction being Butterfly, and my favourite kids' book being Amari and the Night Brothers, my favourite romance being Part of Your World, my favourite sci-fi being The Three-Body Problem, my favourite fantasy, I guess, would be All the Young Dudes, followed by Juniper and Thorn. That is interesting. I did really like Juniper and Thorn. Well, there we go. That's a successful reading year. I hope that you can take away some recommendations from this, or feel free to ask me about any of these books that I've read. I hope to do a awards video of what different things were for different categories of awards, like if I had to give a favourite character or something like that. I'm going to hopefully look up some questions that I can answer and do that as another video. But here is my final ranking. Enjoy and see you next time.